Okay, hello everyone and good afternoon. Thanks for joining this last panel for today, but not the last for the conference. So keep up in the next 2 days. So it's a pleasure for me to welcome Dmitry Villansky, who is representing a bigger group of artists, art researchers, philosophers called Chto. So I'll briefly introduce Dmitry and Delat, and I see with the few people.
You have something with the sound, Ksenia.
My sound, yeah.
Yes, now,
okay.
Yeah, now it's better.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. It was very low sound, not just disappearing, but it was low level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's hope it stays okay. Yeah. So. It would be great if we thought of this session as more of a seminar, so more of exchange with questions and discussions. So I think for this format, it would be great if we could upgrade everyone to participants, to panelists.
Yeah, it would be great to see people, because actually otherwise I see you, which is nice, but at the same time, I see it's already 19 people. Yeah. In the room, yeah.
So if you don't mind, I will ask Yelena to give you a panelist role. You can switch off your cameras if you like and mute your voice when you're not speaking. I would actually ask you to mute the voice, so we don't have any external noise. So I'm just looking at the message. I will upgrade people when all will be here. Yeah, so we'll wait a couple of minutes, and in the meantime, I'll introduce Dmitry and Chto. So Chto translated "what is to be done," the famous phrase of Lenin, is a working group of artists, critics, philosophers, and writers from St. Petersburg, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, which was founded in 2003 in St. Petersburg, with the goal of merging political theory, art, and activism. Chto sees itself as an artistic cell and as a community organizer for a variety of cultural activities intent on politicizing knowledge production. So these are all the key points and key issues that we'll be talking today: community organizing, education, politicizing knowledge production. The activity of the collective takes responsibility for the post-socialist condition and for bringing the forgotten and repressed potentiality of Soviet past to the forefront, often engaging in a politics of commemoration. And again, it ties in with the themes of the conference, what we have been discussing in the past days: politics of commemoration, forgetting, remembering, responsibility, post-socialism and post-socialist conditions. So I hope to really generate an extensive discussion about this. And today, Dmitry will be introducing, talking about one of their recent projects of the School of Engaged Art. This is a school that has been going on since 2013. It is based in St. Petersburg at Rosa's House of Culture. It invites young artists for schools focused on specific topics. And the most recent topic was mutation and ontology. So this is the publication that I forwarded to you a couple of days ago, and I hope you've had a chance to take a look, read through, and you have questions and comments which we'll bring into discussion. So I think these are the most important points, the introductory points that I wanted to mention. Dmitry will start now by introducing this latest project. Yeah.
Okay, Ksenia, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well, and we already tested. So just if something wrong, just help me to reconnect to the line if it will be some breaks. Anyway, I'm very happy to speak in framework of this intense conference, and I hope that many participants not totally exhausted at the end of this heavy day. I see some friends here. Misha Gabovich with us. Wow, very good. Hello, Misha. And Tanya. Yeah, okay. Maybe I can't follow all list. And actually, as you mentioned already, for Chto делать, that focus on post-Soviet, post-socialist, post-communist, whatever you like to call this condition, are very explicit from the very beginning. And even in our artistic work, if you talk about Perestroika, Zongspiel, I don't know how far you're familiar with works which we did last almost 20 years, but some of them among artistic world was quite present and visible. So Partisan Zongspiel, Not in Russia, не в России, how we call it, and many, many other things. Actually, activist club, which actually derives certain type of aesthetic and messages from Workers' Club of Rodchenko. And yeah, so I can really make a long list. But at the same time, at one moment, we decided that it make for us sense, because as Ksenia mentioned, we're also quite serious with our educational program. And for those of you who don't know situation with art education in Russia, I think it's really, really desperate. So there are no educational institution of critical knowledge. Maximum what artists can learn is kind of simple practice, or I would say craft, how to paint, oil painting, or make kind of classical sculpture. So it's really a shame, but it ran us into long debate, but maybe it connected because it related to our school, because there are few initiatives in Russia which try to compensate or at least provide some basic education for that younger generation of artists in Russia. And mostly they are in Petersburg, I would say, in Moscow, sorry. In St. Petersburg, I would say we are not the only one, but almost only one, because there are a few decent other initiatives which much less regular and actually much more limited in the resources and positioning inside even local art scene. So that's the situation. And for us, we start to chat with Ksenia. Actually, the participants of the school, it's a very open invitation. We don't limit the idea what is subjectivity of artistic, of artists can be now, it can be whatever. So we more kind of coming from that political necessity, urgencies, and also kind of conceptual thinking. So we understand that in very short period of 1 year, 1.5 years, we can hardly teach or learn together certain mastery, but we really would like to learn how to take position, be engaged with our politics and society. And at the same time, from time to time, when we get a little bit tired of that kind of endless courses with new people, we make so-called relearning program. And what we talked today, it was actually 1.5 years relearning program totally dedicated to post-Soviet, because in Russia, I really enjoy this particular, we can argue it later. So particular this term. And this course is over because of COVID. It was delayed and then mutate, which already Ksenia mentioned. So I will be speak about it. But let me first maybe share my screen, and maybe because you already see some of, I can't, is it, do you see? Yes, okay. So this is our actually website, School of Engaged Art, and this is exactly intro text about our course post-Soviet studies, why we would like to engage with this topic, because also very important, because on one hand, it looks like that the word studies bring us into the realm of academia. You know, everyone have gender studies, decolonial studies, queer studies, whatever studies. And of course, research, also very key word, which we also should recognize that we might use in different ways. And I would say, coming from artistic context and also from activist context, I would differentiate between academia with a very serious approach and evaluation to different type of studies and research. Like militant research, if you know, remember this term coming from Italian operaismo, was actually trying to gain a knowledge useful for struggle. So it was absolutely biased, kind of engaged knowledge production. Then, of course, it was actually also implemented into academia. And it's a little bit another story of instrumentalization, but at the same time, I would say artistic research, quite similar. You research something because you produce artistic statement or artistic work or something which belongs the realm to aesthetic, not to realm of pure knowledge. And this is, I think, quite important that actually art research can be whatever from just, I don't know, 3 months of sleep and then waking up, you know, with a brilliant idea. I respect this research too. It can be a different type of gaining different data, metadata, whatever. So, but at the end, it should be presented to the public in the form of artistic work. Also in super expanded field, notion. What is artistic work? We don't discuss. So for us, post-Soviet studies was actually combined with that kind of research because we understood that after 30 years of collapse of Soviet Union, we still lack a certain knowledge which allow us to produce some artistic statement. And if you go deeper and actually you remember very powerful and important project which actually discuss post-Soviet conditions. First of all, it should be mentioned with Boris Groys. Maybe actually I can also share, or maybe, yeah, I can, maybe not. Just a moment, maybe just his project Privatization, his big exhibition, and actually post-Soviet condition, it was published 3-volume books. I think it was published only in German, as far as I remember. But maybe I'm wrong, and they were also published in English, some of them maybe. Just let me show you. Yeah, you see my screen, I guess, yeah? Yeah, okay, so yeah, so I'm completely open. So yeah, that was post-communist condition. So it was 2003, 2004 was really one of the most crucial things, which actually helped us a lot to continue. So it was actually done in St. Martin's College in London. So, and some other stuff. So, and just where I am now, I maybe return here. So our program of Soviet studies was really also done in a dialogue with a new generation, because before, like my generation, who belongs to this generation, I would say half of the life, or maybe less than half, 1/3, but very crucial period of time, have a life experience of not post-Soviet, but Soviet condition, you know? And it was quite special. Right now, we have a generation, we have no connection, no life connection, only through oral memories of the parents, or the relatives, or the grandparents, or friends, whoever, so family, maybe, or books. So they have not immediate content, but mediated. I like these sounds of bottle. It really wake me up. So that was the point, and to see, because at the same time we see growing global inequality, that even you can feel it in places like GDR, where East German stories completely with a way, but at the same time, young people from East quite still seriously different from their colleagues or mates or whatever. So that's really very interesting phenomena. And we also connected them maybe through that very general description of the territory of a land and its history. So for us, it was really important because territory full with that kind of, and we also speak later about that haunting, ghost, and so on and so on. But maybe I can just stop sharing and maybe just give you, I'm unfortunately don't have second screen here. So I just give you some points why this return is meaningful for us and how it developed. So, but actually, yeah, and then I can really going back to our website and maybe show some results of this research. So first factors which move us to the reconsideration was the return of geopolitical conflicts, which absolutely obvious have origins in Cold War times. And even today with it, where everyone is very anxious about situation in Karabakh and Belarus, we would definitely find the language to describe them. Maybe, oh, there was some noise.
Yes, I muted.
You
I'm
muted.
sorry, but yeah, so now it's fine.
Now it's fine. Okay. So, but if you really decide to analyze Belarus in kind of comprehensive way, actually funny in this newspaper, which was published before events and uprising in Minsk, there were two materials from Minsk. One on music group Молчат Дома as a kind of example of music ontology, which very much kind of in sync with what Mark Fisher was taken as example of ontological music. So it's brilliant article, actually written not by Belarusian, but one British scholar. And one material from Работай больше, отдыхай больше, it's Belarusian collective of 4 people who actually are really crucial for analyzing many things. And from the recent project, we republished this open call. So it's obvious that this new stage, like West versus Russia, it's actually started long time ago. And also speaking with a very kind of provocative position, I would say you can also recall an expansion of NATO to the east in violation of initial agreement with Russia and Gorbachev, or bombing Serbia in 1999, then also the geopolitical kind of post-colonial conflicts around Georgia, with Ossetia and Abkhazia, of course, Ukraine, 2014, Syria, many kind of post-colonial situation in Africa where Russia plays kind of quite explicit anti-Western position that obviously bring us back into quite serious escalation, and situation obviously deteriorating, and this practice of splitting into camps create new configuration. And yeah, and again, this kind of old histories should somehow be reconsidered in many ways. Like, for example, very interesting, I mentioned already that kind of decolonial or fight against anti-imperialism struggle in Africa, where Russia plays this double game, and right now it's super dirty, but at the same time, origins coming from Soviet time. So, and cultural workers in Russia, regardless of their relationship to the government right now, are cut off from international funding because Russia is under sanctions. So, of course, enemy should be studied, but it also needs to be isolated. You know, also quite interesting scientific approach when the actually object of your studies, but they can keep isolated, otherwise you don't know how to interpret it. I hope you understand what I mean. And yeah, and this is a serious challenge. And this also connects us to the second paragraph, which I would like to discuss. It's reproduction of old models of Eastern European and Russian subalternity in this new geopolitical situation. So, subordinated subject always in oppressed position in relation to the Western master, who administrate resources, produce languages of inclusion and exclusion, languages of academia. Actually, most of brilliant people who study Russia and Eastern Europe, they move to the West, because only in the West you have resources, you have access to certain academic practices and so on. And these colonizing attitudes towards everything which is east from the order, I would say, is not a fiction, is not a conspiracy. It's perfectly material fact. And apparently has not gone anywhere. And like a series of conflicts, differences in development, and so on. I actually made a very funny remark that even Marx despised various forms of Asiatic barbarism, which for him included Russia, which he considered a hopelessly backwards country that need time to catch up development up to the level of the capitalism of his day. Of course, Marx was absolutely sure, as you remember, that revolution would come from UK, where capitalism reached certain kind of saturation and development of production forces. But history turned out to be different. And also this position, I mean, the Marx also right now pretty much resembles the current liberal perspective of so-called developed and democratic countries, or with that idea of catching up development, and that when you are not in pure democracy, you can't create any kind of knowledge because you are actually not full subjects. So, funny also to mention that ideology of Putinism is built on a sort of perverted reading of decolonial theory. The local idea of sovereign democracy, I don't know if you remember Vladislav Surkov and that kind of general, very kind of ideological political concept that we don't have democracy, we have sovereign democracy as a political space free from judgment and interference from without. So this is really one of the key idea of Russian politics, let's say. At the same time, you can formulate it in a way like simply you can say we'll torture our serfs however we want if we feel like, or we'll take care of them like God commanded to us too. So it's absolutely freedom of doing without any kind of possibility of control. And you know what right now going on with Russia and with all the poisons and many other stuff. So, and Putin is permanently persist this kind of appeal, let's speak as equal, because from very beginning they feel they are not treated as equal in that kind of global capitalist neoliberal network. So I don't know what to say here, but at the same time, as I said, that kind of subalternity create completely kind of new subjectivity of creative workers and artists, and that is very interesting because this particular type of subalternity not even recognized from the West. And I can speak more about it from my personal experience, but at the same time, to speak as an equal is a very, very complicated process, especially when you don't have support for any kind of critical language and speaking. And at the same time, here maybe the most provocative thesis, which I would like to share with you today, how to overcome this subalternity, and also try to become equal. So, and for me, this kind of position demand reinterpreting the idea of universal world. Hope it's not so difficult to explain. It could be based on very simple declaration. Without me, the world is incomplete. This appeal to completeness and to possibility of metaposition is the only way, as I would interpret it, to overcome subalternity. And important to insist that universality is not Western, it's not colonial, it's not patriarchal, it's nobody. So maybe it's very kind of post-communist statement, very much in wake of Andrei Platonov. Universality have a zero level of belonging. And after Soviet project, we can even radicalize it. We can really disentangle universality from the concept of class, because actually it was very much class-based in Soviet time, and the human itself. So if you feel like we can discuss, I feel it's a little bit complicated. I hope not, but anyway. So, and also I would like to mention as a point 3 that also post-Soviet studies, the return to this topic right now, is dictated by the growth of ethical tone in public sphere and in the arts, where the legitimacy of artists, journalists, researcher, academic is increasingly judged according to the principle of speakers' direct, authentic belonging to the event, place, class, identity, or group of speakers. I'm not sure that I really so fanatically share this kind of demand, but at the same time, I also understand the genealogy. Yeah, so I would definitely have certain form of skepticism if, let's say, not gay guys speak about gay movement. Of course, it's possible, and actually it's a little bit contradicting simplistic way, which I just talk about universality, but at the same time, maybe not, because actually that certain way of belonging and relationship of belonging come to the fore today. At the same time, I would like not to interpret it in a sensationalist way, as identity politics propose we do. The relationship of becoming and solidarity can be built. And this for us also the lessons of Soviet experience. And actually, if we speak about right now artistic positions, so for us would be natural to take responsibility for this particular place, for this particular territory, its history, its ghost, its dead, and so on. So point number 4, a new way of anti-communism. This is really funny. So, because it paradoxically appearing at the moment of complete defeat of the left. Like, if you check that Trump paranoia of anti-fascism movement in US, of course, they are pretty powerful and very strong movement, which can kick the ass of neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan in the US, but at the same time, it's so far away from that kind of idea that communism again penetrated society. So, and at the same time, I think it also kind of inherent problem of capitalism, because the only one enemy or two only one enemy which he can seriously treat is a kind of specter or real communism. That's why capitalism always draw on the most reactionary form of fascism, nationalism, fundamentalism, military juntas, genocides in this conflict. So, and you know also that capital was also victorious and tragically victorious in these fights. But at the same time, anti-communism hasn't gone anywhere, and now is undergoing new form of resurgence. Also in Latin America, if you see the victory of Bolsonaro was very much anti-left and that kind of paranoia of communism. As I mentioned, Trump, of course, Ukraine is super, they really wake up and see that Soviet Union reestablished and so on and so on. And at the same time, it's very interesting because it brings us that kind of a bridge to my last fifth position, is that anti-communism is kind of eternal battle with these returning specters of the ghost of the communism and the kind of attempt to genocide against the specter of universal, which with many ton silver bullets and rockets for stake, any kind of games are possible, but at the same time, and it's coming to fifth point, that spectre zone. And actually our course, as already Ksenia mentioned, was kind of experiments in applied, we called it applied, post-Soviet ontology. Of course, most of you know very well, better than me probably, Derrida and his book. And actually, it's very important to remember that socialist countries exist in two regimes. One, it was kind of real place with a kind of real brutal histories and social politics and experimentations and so on. And other existence was pure spiritual, pure existence as an idea. And it created certain kind of contradiction because for those people who lived under socialism in Soviet Union or in Cuba, this regime was quite obvious catastrophic in their daily life and in their kind of also dreaming. But for many people who live outside, like French intellectuals or British intellectuals or US, so it was really kind of a zone of imagination of where all kind of communist dreams come true, or at least keep in potentiality, which can be again unfrozen and shared with the world. So, and I would say Derrida came to visit USSR in '89 first time, and he developed these ideas of ontology. And we also try that kind of test this new relation with old specters, and especially when you live here with a lot of that spaces, like I mentioned already, that Belarusian group Molchat Dama. So in music and your feeling and certain kind of fashion. So it's nothing about nostalgia. It's really, I'm strongly would oppose this kind of term, which also have material traces, obviously. But so that reestablishing the contact with the spectre actually ran us to that last project, which we called Ghost Mutant. And then maybe here I would stop. And maybe some questions till now, because then I can go maybe deeper into our website and actually explain some practical results of this kind of pre-composition for that new forms of research and artistic practice. But at the same time, I'm a little bit would be happy to hear any kind of feedback, or maybe Ksenia, you prepared a few questions, so I will definitely start with. So, please.
Yes, yes. Thanks so much, Dmitry, for very thought-provoking and really, really, yeah, a lot of ideas in these theses, a lot of compressed in them.
I can share in written form if you feel like, yeah, it's written text, yeah.
And I think they're also on the website there.
I'm not sure.
No, I thought there's...
I think it's on Russian website.
Maybe it's in Russian, yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah, so Just opening my notes. Maybe I just start with one question or one response, and then we'll open the discussion. So I think you touched upon or really elaborated several ideas that we have been talking already in the past few days. The geopolitics of memory, dealing with the past in general, particularly in recent years with the resurgence of Cold War binaries. This is something that Heidi Grunebaum was talking in her plenary address lecture 2 days ago. She was talking about the regime of partition. So she was focusing on Israel-Palestine and tracing how Eurocentrism, so the creating of the figure of the Jew as the other, and the failure of Europe to incorporate Jewishness, the failure of Europe is resonating today in the partitions that are created by the state of Israel, and similar structures can be identified elsewhere, of course. So she sort of extended the critique of colonialism, Eurocentrism, to address these present day situations, which are post-colonial. So this is something that resonated for me about what you were saying about the separating of the subject. Yeah, so the disconnecting, the partitioning. So you were talking about the Eastern European or the Russian subject as being nowadays partitioned, sanctioned, put in a box. And this is something I think we are familiar with. In my own experience, I'm familiar with that as somebody who is teaching Russian studies, Russian culture, and to mostly Dutch students, but also a lot of Eastern European students who do not want to know anything else than what they're familiar with. Here we come to anti-communism, yeah, so as a really reactivated practice today. So these are just some notes. I think my questions would be two. One of them, you already started problematizing this this conflict or this tension between universality on the one hand, and on the other hand, the speaking position. You are speaking from somewhere. You are rooted. If you don't belong, or we don't even speak about identity, belonging, but you are rooted in some kind of situation, some kind of condition. Yeah. So we are talking about the post-Soviet condition. So we are speaking from it. So how this can be should it be part of universalism, and how this universalism can be non-Eurocentric? So this is something that you already started, so maybe we just can continue this discussion. And the second question about post-Soviet ontology.
One by one. So
okay, let's start with that
question, otherwise my head will go. You know, it's one of the most complicated questions. First of all, I would maybe rely, I don't know if it's familiar for people from non-art world, but alter-modernism. Have you ever heard about it? Because, you know, modernism under attack, very legitimate attack. Right now, in current situation, it needs to be certain very serious reconsideration. But at the same time, alter-modernism also connected with different form of universality. And actually, I would say it also very kind of Marxist idea. Everyone remember his quote from Communist Manifesto, how world literature appear from different nation, different localities, different languages, different sources. And when you exclude some sources, you lost this kind of, he was Hegelian, that kind of totality of vision, which was his human vocation, to keep this. Like, for example, we as an artist, we deal with a major Western museum, like, let's say, MoMA in New York or Tate, and you see how their knowledge, how their collection is biased completely to their kind of colonial or post-colonial, whatever you like, vision. So they might have some quite serious relation with Africa or Latin America, but at the same time, they have very few experiences in Eastern Europe. And I'm talking about this museum because they always have that appeal of universal museum. They always be pretended we are a comprehensive world museum which can really represent a real proper history. Doesn't matter if we make certain fragmentation and differentiation anyway. And then you'll see how the whole history, the body of works, artists, it's absolutely excluded. So, and starting to talk about that, but my idea would be more radical. And that's why I spoke a few times about it. Very few people really understand what to the link, the universality and West and even human, you know, that universal becomes at what we call zero level of belonging. It really belongs to nobody. When, for example, West criticized universality as a Western concept, we should simply come and say, it's not Western concept. It's not fucking your concept. It belongs to nobody. Thanks for your contribution. But now we should really claim it's nobody's. It's not yours, not African, not Soviet. It's really, and in this kind of zero level of belonging, we can start completely new way of thinking. That's my imagination. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. At least it's not popular idea, I would say. And even, you know, people don't really understand. You know, actually here again, we come into that local knowledge. For anyone who read Platonov, that's pretty understandable. That communism is not Soviet idea, you know, it belongs to nobody. That's why it really brings all people together. It also not against identity, like Marx text about world literature, which come from many identities, but at the same time, it really common in there. Also, many people in West like to speak about commons, but at the same time, I'm not sure we understand the same things behind this word. Even it's very difficult to translate what they mean actually. So for them, commons more kind of community. For us, commons, it's much more, it's общее, which means nobody. It's not belong to community, it's nobody, because it belongs to everyone, you know. And actually these particular certain political developments like Black Lives Matter and so on, I feel they are super radical, super important, but at the same time, they lack this kind of inherent knowledge, which for me would be another kind of political thinking. Anyway, so I stop here. I don't know if I answered your question, but I did my best. But it's very complicated.
It is complex, but reference to Platonov, that already sort of clicks a little bit.
Yeah, sure. But not only Platonov, I think it was really imprinted in certain kind of ideas of that new humans who actually have certain form of ethnicity, certain form of national belonging, but at the same time really becomes that kind of universal man or human, you know.
Yeah, and what you, I'm not sure, it was probably in this newspaper, right? It was the first article in the newspaper. I forgot the author's name now. She's writing about common sense. And common sense, yeah.
One actually contributor is with us. I hear Tanya Bagacheva. I don't know. It was from the East, that critique of Chantal Ackerman. Actually, very much related to the topic which we discuss right now. I don't know if Tanya feel like that, but anyway, I really appreciate you.
Yeah, I would be happy to say something, but I'm pretty sure that another article was referred to.
Yeah,
in our newspaper.
I should check who was the first one. Maybe it was Simakova, Maria.
Yes. I think Maria.
I have the newspaper here.
Yeah, just a minute.
Is she here also?
No, Maria is not. Yeah, it was Maria Simakova, the post-Soviet trouble. Yes. Political meditation and quest for the sense. Yes. It was Simakova. Yes, sure.
Yeah, so that was really, really interesting, this concept of common sense, sort of rethinking it, because it is used a lot in populist and anti-populist discourse nowadays. And she's doing something different with it. So I was wondering if you could...
Yeah, you know, but at the same time, it also very much brings us to some certain cultural references, which very maybe visible in certain, at least intellectual or academia or artistic circles, and maybe not visible at all in the different. So I think as far, I'm sorry, I have to refresh this text, but at the same time, I'm quite obvious. I remember that feeling when we speak about common sense. I would definitely read it as a very Brechtian references. Brecht spoke a lot about common sense from a radical leftist anti-fascist perspective. You absolutely correctly mentioned about that kind of new populist tone when actually also people speak about common sense, but quite different from what Brechtian kind of class-based position. So, and position of crude thinking, that cruel thinking, which quite kind of simplification in order to make it more complex. You know, actually as a principle which we also try to share with young generation, it's actually Brechtian principle of dialectic. And dialectic is to make simple complex and make complex simple. Right now, people very often make simple things super complex, then they completely entangled and get lost, you know? But they forgot that it should be run in parallel to make complex things simple. Then you can get this circle, and then you can get incredible aesthetic and intellectual insights into situation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, so I had one more question. Maybe I just ask it now, abusing my privilege as moderator, and then we open the discussion further. So the question was about post-Soviet ontology and how you use this term, I think quite productively, but this term was also used, taken from Derrida by Alexander Etkind. And you're certainly familiar with this use and his critique of current culture of repressing the Soviet Stalinist repressions and of specters of it haunting contemporary societies in different way, begging to take action, to take responsibility. So I was wondering, and you actually speak about the specters not of repressed repression, but of repressed Soviets. So how do these specters talk to each other? How do they interact?
Yeah, that's pretty difficult. You know, actually, we also try a little bit to reduce, again, very great that I mentioned before, that kind of make complex things simple. So we spoke about very humble way to speak about applied ontology, to find your personal ghost, which you might communicate with. It could be something not real person or event. It can be something like object-based, you know, space, you know, because spaces are very important this way. And then through communication with this space or with this kind of situation, let's say, you can really unpack many things in today's reality. So it's not just for, you know, ловить привидений, which is also funny, and I translate to catch up the spirits, you know, yeah, like a game, which also quite artistically, I wouldn't say completely nonsense, you know. But for us, and actually in the school, we were actually making that kind of a game, creating your own ghost and then try to establish communication. Actually, it come up from our practice, because if you might remember our works, like, let's say, typical example, Partisan Songspiel, where we create the ghost of dead partisans. which pop up in the form of the monument, not yet destroyed, but at the same time, they start to negotiate with different people, what they think about, how people not really like them or maybe love them. So it creates certain confusion, but very productive to speak about Belgrade situation of 2009. So I think that was, for me, quite exemplary situation when we work with the ghost ourselves. And also, I guess in this publication, also when the ghosts start mutate. So for us was also understanding that not a stable situation, because you know when you have father of the Gamlet's dead, it's quite stable. Guy who knows what has happened, have not much to say, but at the same time demand revenge. So his son should really solve the situation. Our Hamlet dead would be absolutely, you know, he could come one night, demand one thing, and come in next night demanding completely opposite, you know. And then you'll be completely kind of more postmodern, you know, ghosts, you know. And at the same time, yes, that kind of more sensitive to that situation, especially now when, of course, at this, again, let's say territory, it's pretty much inhabited by the ghosts. So when you take a train or you go outskirts of Petersburg even, or Moscow, far into Russia, you are really overwhelmed by that. And you don't know how you read it now, because how you did read it 5 years ago is completely different. Like, I know that you spoke about commemoration. So what to do with that anti-fascist monuments today? You know, all that kind of relics of Second World War. Misha Gabovich is a big specialist. He's really studies them a lot, and new rituals, how rituals, because through that monument creates their own rituals, sometimes rituals destroyed, but then pop up new rituals with completely new kind of participations, you know? So I don't have kind of clear-cut answer to what you ask. So you have to be experimental, and actually maybe again speaking from the context of art school, what we can give, we don't give that kind of know how to create art. No, we actually develop certain sensibility to certain kind of forms and situations, which then people might create. Look, it might be ghost around. If you see them, it can be interesting. If not, okay, it's useful.
No, thanks so much. I think that that's very productive also to sort of open up this figure of the ghost to experiment in what he can be and what he can do to us and what our response to him can be.
I can tell you one thing, you know, right now, because of COVID, we canceled one of the most important projects. It's pure hauntological project. It's called Mandelstam Ho Chi Minh. You see no connection, right? No one see any connection. But when you start to research, you find one totally forgotten article that Mandelstam wrote and ran a dialogue with Ho Chi Minh in Moscow in 1921. And he wrote amazing poetic texts. Well, he was like young journalist working for Огонек magazine, you know? And he wrote this text after meeting completely inspired by Ho Chi Minh. They never met again. Last year, Olga and me, we came to Hanoi and visited Museum of Ho Chi Minh. We were incredibly inspired by that kind of universal museum which deals with the cosmos, with personal history of Ho Chi Minh, world revolution, world history of art. Amazing. Then we discovered the guy who did this museum was from St. Petersburg, from Leningrad. One of very interesting Soviet designer and architect already died. So it was done by Soviet people. You know, it was done at the edge of perestroika in 1991 when everything was collapsing. And immediately what came into my mind and Olga also, so these two guys should meet again. Ho Chi Minh should meet Mandelstam, and they should meet in Hanoi. How they meet? They meet like a ghost. And they have plenty to talk about. So it's a new project which a little bit hang in the air, but at the same time, it really presents the idea of that applied ontology. To speak about something, you need to meet some ghost. Or maybe create it, I don't mind. You can be, with ghost, you can be sometimes cynical, you know, guys, come on, ghost, come, you know? But through creation, these two ghosts, you can really make the whole picture of what happened after 1991. And at the same time, with strongest references to 1921, when two young boys who was 20 something just met, you know. No, they were 30 years old. They're the same age.
Oh, this is amazing.
So, yeah. So
is it a project
that's
you
the story. That's the story.
Is it a project that you're doing or planning to do, or is it
you
just
know, our travel was meticulously planned with director of museum, with many people. I made few interviews in Moscow. It was canceled because of COVID, you know. We hope to return and with new urgencies. So yeah, I don't know how it will be now, but at the same time, as an idea, it exists, and when something exists, an idea, they might implement sometimes.
Great, we'll follow. So yeah, I think now I'm opening the floor to everyone with questions, comments to what Dmitry has just been saying, or to the newspaper which was circulated. Please.
Yeah, also, you know, we jump, and actually I didn't show you materials, but I really recommend, especially for people who read Russian, to go on our website in this kind of post-Soviet studies. You can actually get quite good materials. So Ghost Mutants, actually it's a very good show. Also, this is publication, more kind of text-based, but at the same time, it was combined with exhibition online. It has very good, especially done layout. This in Russian, so we have to switch to Russian. Yes, so yeah, that was actually final presentation of our laboratory. Yeah. Oh, and Tanya. It starts with Tanya.
Yes, Tanya, would you like to?
Maybe.
It's a film about a film by Ackerman, yeah?
Yeah, but actually Tanya's publication also connected because it was also as an artistic contribution to the exhibition, online exhibition, which also carry actually quite a lot of text inside. And also as a text in newspapers. So yeah. If Tanya would like to say something, just feel free. It would be nice to hear you.
Maybe about how you came to that topic and that film, and how did this project come about?
Just give me a second. I'm trying to connect whatever I can say about my project with the questions that I have. Yeah, I think that Dima said something about this question of universality and exclusion is something that bothers me a lot, and it kind of like comes up in any conversation, in any text that I'm reading. And I think that we maybe had already this discussion, but in a different setting. So I'm going to repeat my question. When you're saying that this universality is somehow rejects identifications, right? And questions this immediate understanding of authentic pronouncement through belonging to a particular place. But then, Dima, you also said that class does not like figure as a form of identification. And I'm not sure whether I completely agree with this. I feel that when we say something like this, we reject the only possibility of kind of like politicizing our, making our statements political. So for me, class should be kind of like on the surface in any discussion, and this is like the only way to somehow, oh, sorry, I'm not thinking fast enough today. Yeah, what can you say about this universality without class identification? I don't really understand how it can be critical or radical without it.
I can comment because it's really quite complex issue, but you know, the universality in the communist sense was a kind of universality of proletarian, you know, which actually in this kind of horizon overcome class division, like communism is classless society. If it's possible to rethink certain kind of classless situation without communism. On one hand, we see kind of opportunistic approach to do it through identity. I think it's opportunistic because it ignores that situation of that class should be overcome to keep it as a horizon. No, for example, new identities permanently insist on their essential kind of status, you know, and especially it also, okay, it runs us too far, but it's kind of mostly structured through the victimhood. So you should be victim and then you get your proper substantial identity. In communism theory, let's leave a little bit practice aside. That's why we come to the realm of ideas. That was actually the idea that class, like a state, should be something which we should overcome, you know, and then it creates that certain universality, which I also completely agree, which doesn't need class or even humans, you know, it should be really kind of what I'm repeating, nobodies. It's not proletarian, not bourgeoisie, not that, it's nobodies, you know, and that idea of nobody, it's radically different from idea of identity. You know, actually, also it's maybe sometimes risk to be written too spiritual because to become desubjectivate yourself, to become, you know, when you say that it belongs to nobody, it means that someone already nobody. So, and then for me sounds a little bit too spiritual, but at the same time, if we talk in more kind of materialistic way, like Benjamin would do, you know, then we maybe come to that kind of essence of that things, and maybe you understand. I'm absolutely with you that we are too far away that get rid of that class, you know, but at the same time, tactically speaking, in our fight for universality right now, we should say it's nobody. It's not proletarian. Because if you keep on saying that it's proletarian idea, nobody will understand.
Yeah.
Maybe it's nobody's also quite weak answer, but at the same time, for me, it's a bit stronger than today to say that kind of class-shaped universality.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But the idea kind of like that I come back to often when I think about these things, about how kind of like class is, of course, something in classical Marxism, something that structures society. And Marina Gzinic talks about racism, which kind of like in the colonial, post-colonial studies, this is the, let's say, binary which organizes the world, right, with all the imperial and colonial endeavors. And she talks, and I have the book here from which I'm quoting, she talks about class racism or racialization without race. And she explains it as a division between actual workers, people who work, have to work, and the class, or she even uses the word caste, of those who are free to work. And I think that this is kind of division is very interesting, and it allows to look with, to see a lot of nuances where there's a difference between those who have to work and those who are free to work. And somewhere she also says that if Europe, where I am right now, if class in Europe had color, then cities like Berlin would have looked like apartheid societies, you know, where division is very, very visible. So I'm kind of, I'm very much on this ideological level on with you on the same page, but it kind of like worries me when I hear kind of like statements in which class is said to be like a redundant category or strategically not useful. Maybe we can kind of like do something around it, but keep it.
I need to apologize.
Yeah.
No, it was not my intention at all. No.
Yeah.
A little bit kind of a qualitative jump into something else. No, of course, it's super important and maybe one of the most important things today. And actually what Marina said, it's super legitimate and yeah, so and very real. Actually, I forgot that actually I wanted to face all of us with certain question, because for me, because our course of the post-Soviet studies, as you might remember, was interrupted through the dramatic event of COVID. And actually, in my comprehension, if it's possible now in the midst of pandemic, of course, that actually the way how post-Soviet countries, post-socialist countries, Vietnam included, Cuba included, reacted to COVID, and also different kind of semi-conspirological speculations about, you know, that TB vaccine, which was done in Soviet Union, which protect people better, and that was obligatory to vaccinate the whole population. That kind of people analyze the numbers between GDR and West Germany, which also demonstrates certain kind of different rates of death and so on and so on. I would say that for me would be really interesting new case studies, which might be I contributed as a sixth factor, that kind of COVID relation and post-Soviet studies. I'm not yet ready to give any kind of proper analysis, but I'm curious about it. I'm sure that people would definitely do it, not just about this notorious vaccine, but about more kind of complex things from certain fatal approach and so on. But at the same time, also that's advantage of that advanced countries also quite interesting, that the most advanced countries like US spend on medicine more money than the rest of the world. At the same time, you'll see that it's the most vulnerable, most shitty medical system in the world. So UK is the same, you know. Actually, it's quite interesting how that semi-privatization, because actually that kind of healthcare system, when you analyze it in post-socialist countries, it's quite different because it creates like ambulance system. It's very different. So I don't know if any of you studied it in more details, but at the same time, it's quite big issue. Of course, it's also privatized, ruined, also very differentiated between big cities and small cities, of course, between countries too. We just talked with Ksenia about situation in Moldavia, where she is from, and it's quite bad. So very bad.
I'm not from Moldavia.
You're not from Moldavia?
No. I'm from St. Petersburg, actually. So...
Really? Why? But you plan event in Moldavia?
Yes.
I see. You lost confused. Sorry, Ksenia. Sorry.
No. Yeah, we would have been in Moldavia right now.
You would have been in Moldavia right now.
And that would have been my first time too.
I see. Sorry, it was really kind of confusion. Yeah, I dream to come to Moldavia, actually. One of few countries I've never been. I've been to Romania many times. I know it very well. Yeah, but at the same time, there is a certain kind of, despite, as I said, that 30 years of that kind of transformation, privatization, wars, violence, and whatever, I still feel that very, very strong difference when you cross something west, 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 or wherever. So.
So yeah, I just welcome questions and on any topic. Yeah, from what we were just talking about, COVID, to more distant past haunting us. Anyone?
Maybe people find it weird what we talk about.
Maybe, yeah. I'm sure many are tired also after this.
Yeah, probably.
Many days of conference already.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi. I missed the first part of the session, so I'm sorry, and that's kind of why I felt a bit uncertain whether I should say anything, because I maybe missed something that might make sense. Yeah, and then my question might not make any sense. But I've actually been troubled by the idea of haunting in the context that I work on, and the place that I'm from, which is from South Africa, and it's been a very popular idea there, and particularly in cultural studies and literary studies and memory studies and all of this kind of thing. And yeah, I really like your idea about actualizing the ghosts and making them present in this way, because I think sometimes it gets used as a way to evade the past, actually, in a kind of in the way that ghosts are, like a kind of ephemeral presence that doesn't really touch you. So I think there's something really great about materializing them. So yeah, because I think otherwise it can be quite a problematic concept in terms of evacuating the political. Yeah, so it's a lesser question and just something for everyone to think about. It's something, yeah, I've always found the haunting, metaphors of haunting and ideas about haunting to be a little bit troubling in places where there's still so much ongoing challenges, crises, problems, political, real things happening. Yeah.
Maybe I try to clarify, but I hope it was a little bit clear that we are talking about hauntology not for hauntology's sake, just opposite. We are talking about that through kind of contact, or okay, let's say straightforward, or creation, the ghost, you can get much better understanding of at least what you just mentioned about your problems of today. And so, for example, without them, me as an artist, it's one of the methods. It can be different, okay. But at the same time, I see that like from Shakespeare time, when he introduced the ghost, maybe long before in some other situation, actually this artistic or imaginary methodology opens up possibility to speak about politics of today, about some most hardcore problems. Without them, it can be really, but again, I'm not talking about from, as I said, from the very beginning, which you might miss, about academic perspective or activist perspective. I'm talking from artistic position, because art has possibility to reveal something in society which is invisible. Ghosts also invisible, so, but at the same time, they communicate. You can create this communication in kind of artificial way, like author do, or filmmaker, or whoever, at the exhibition. And then through that appearance, you reveal something which is very actually urgent and so on. Something like that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dmitry. I'm just, yeah, I see that apparently now that everyone has been promoted to panelist, you can't use the Q&A. I'm not sure how to change that. Elena, if you can enable the Q&A, could you do that? Or otherwise, everyone is just welcome to either type their questions in the chat or change, or just simply, yeah, start conversation, to unmute. You can unmute yourselves and start speaking.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, Rose.
Yeah, I just find it really fascinating how the discussion sort of evolved, and especially about the ghost. And I'm currently writing my PhD on experiential museums and how
I didn't get.
I'm writing my PhD on experiential museums, museums that deal with communist pasts.
I see. Very cool. Oh, yeah.
So I'm just curious because I'm also exploring the idea on prosthetic memory, where people can, through artistic forms such as movies or reading books, people can have a prosthetic memory of a certain past because of how the story is being told, or how they get involved sort of in these kinds of artistic experiences, modes of experiences. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. I mean, speaking about ghosts and, being haunted by sort of the past, or bringing people to life through different artistic means. How museums could, just your opinion about how museums could incorporate these kinds of forms in giving a tourist, for example, a created past that they didn't really live in, but then sort of a mediated past in the sense of perhaps one thing that I could think about are like people telling their stories of how it was before through maybe video testimonies, because this is sort of a ghost in a sense. So I just wanted to see your thoughts, like from an artistic point of view.
Actually, ghost as a mediator of this type of museum. I think it could be super spectacular. You come and hear some ghost voice. Yeah, I'm joking. Yeah, of course, can be whatever. So yeah, but at the same time, yeah, I'm quite sure that applied ontology offer so many kind of possibilities of construction and applied kind of usage. But you should be careful. I'm sometimes, maybe I sound a little bit too playful, but same time you have to really be careful with the ghosts, because I'm not innocent, And actually living in Russia and many other places, you understand they can be really poisoned experience. So, I'm sorry to say a little bit like coronavirus dissident speech, but at the same time, you have to establish relation with the virus. I really seriously believe that, of course, it's contagious, it's super dangerous, but at the same time, like, also maybe sounds too crazy spiritual, but at the same time, your immune system, how you treat, that in human agency, I would not call it a war. I think the biggest mistake of our whole kind of madness and that going on the war with the virus, it's actually very wrong, and especially create a lot of fatalities, and deaths in its own. Because if you make that heroic war with that kind of invisible enemy, you might lose, because the enemy is super clever and smart and, have absolutely another logic that we can comprehend. The same with the ghost, you can play with them, that's true. You can use them for kind of practice. Ghost, let's walk as a mediator, but at the same time, you have to be really careful because it has its own agency. And if you are serious about this construction, then you have to also be responsible. That's all what I want to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, and it also speaks about the need for a new kind of vocabulary beyond this militaristic one. I mean,
Yes.
vocabulary in a very broad sense, not just the language itself, but also action. We have another question from Nelen Milic. Can you see it? Dmitry?
It's in the chat, yes?
I can also read it out. Have you considered engaging with Derrida's Spectres of Marx or Gordon's Ghostly Matters, where ghosts are represented as a discourse that underpins the whole production of knowledge? I can ask this on camera. Yeah, please. Yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, Nela.
Yeah, I immediately agree. Nela Milic. Hi, Nela.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, yeah.
Well, I'm conscious that these authors are part of the kind of Western hemisphere. For that reason, they might not be interesting to you, but they have been engaging with ghosts in a kind of ideological sense, and I thought that's really interesting, especially Derrida, who is actually criticizing the whole Western production knowledge as being colored by this specter of Marx. And also ghosts have been present because you have been quite strong in dividing East and West at the start of this talk, and I thought ghosts are really present in the Western culture, from Shakespeare's Hamlet that we all know of to contemporary cultures where ghosts are really embodying in a way a lot of spaces of popular television shows from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and this kind of thing, So I'm just thinking that ghosts are not exclusively Eastern in some kind of way,
sure.
and how. Yeah, but also I would just like to know how this relates to this kind of old-fashioned traditional interpretation of the East having something to do with this underworld and vampires and Draculas and all these kind of things. So yeah, maybe you want to talk about that. I'm gonna switch off my camera because I don't think that my connection is great.
Yeah. Sorry, it was hard to follow your beginning of the speech, but at the end, I can also, maybe sorry if I missed something. Actually, you're absolutely right. It's not really, and it would be absolutely stupid and essentialist insist that ghosts belong to us. We are actually coming from Dracula land and something like that. Not at all. And actually, in our work materials for this course, the main source was actually Mark Fisher. But for us was very interesting how to translate his references, mostly to that kind of British film and music, into kind of local parallel histories, which is absolutely possible. And actually, this article about Молчать дома, it's very much about that connecting, how Belarusian punk group actually connected to Mark Fisher understanding of that kind of how ontology were also very interesting in relation to that kind of no future kind of points where we're absolutely stuck in the present and attacked by different kind of beats and vibes from the past, which you can call metaphorically, because also ghost is a very powerful metaphor and art speaks through metaphors. So quite classical and traditional position, so which is still super powerful. Yeah. So then again, bringing this word back goes completely universal. And actually we heard from South Africa that actually there also was many kind of attempt in academia and also in artistic practice, I'm sure, and also different type of spiritual practice which implement goes. So yeah. So, but again, I'm pretty perplexed why everyone so much get excited about ontology, because it was just one of these paragraphs. I'm much more obsessed about subalternity. not about ontology, what to do with that. I'm very much obsessed with anti-communism, you know, not about ontology, you know, and new kind of Cold War situation with new wars. Let's speak about real. Okay, Ghost, it was nice artistic device in our general overview of the course, but it was not reduced to that at all. Sorry.
I wonder, Dmitry, if you can see the message from Suzanne Altman, or is it only me who can see it?
No, I can't.
Seems to, yeah, be sent privately, but it's to you. So I'll read it out, and yeah, it's very interesting. So thank you, Susanna. Or maybe you would like to just speak via the audio, Susanna?
Oh yeah, sorry. I had to. Do you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had to figure out how this works to make myself audible. Yeah. It's pretty much about my having visited your School of Engaged Art in summer 2014, when it seemed to just have been founded. Maybe 1 or 2 semesters already you taught your class, and then it was in a bar,
Yes.
kind of the back room of a bar, and you showed me around and showed me the presentations of your students, which was very impressive, even more so as I just came from visiting the Manifesta in St. Petersburg, and topics like post-Soviet identity, I mean, in a not kitschy way, or Soviet post-colonial perspective had not been played a role there at all. And then I came to your little whatever orchard, and your students, as young as they were, they really seem to be very focused on interpreting that. My question is, how has this position, that attitude of your students developed during the course of the last 6 years? Secondly, how do established artists, I mean, some of them I know, but how do established artists deal with that post-Soviet, post-colonialist, as the term might be, perspectives?
I think your voice is breaking now.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I think
I got it. Yeah. Yeah. And thanks. Yes. So actually, you visit us in the most dramatic moment of when the war in Ukraine started, and it was actually a big project in trying to get new connection with the situation in Kiev and that war, open war situation and annexation of Crimea. And we have few students from Ukraine for whom it was really very dramatic. You're totally right. But at the same time, I also maybe not mentioned, but I would say we still lack certain kind of artistic manifestation of these topics. Luckily, we have few very good artists like Aslan Gaysumov, he's now called Aslan Gaysum, Taus Makhacheva from Dagestan, Aslan from Chechnya. Also, I definitely recommend the amazing work by Shtab from Bishkek. Unfortunately, they finished their existence as a project with Georg Mamedov and Svetlana Shatalova. So amazing guys. Also, Creole Center from Kazakhstan, from Alma-Ata, Ruth Genderbekova and Maria Velikhovskaya. So yeah, it's actually, there are certain kind of names. They also have very close relation to us. They often teach in our school because, you know, for us, that kind of post-decolonial situation like Madina Tlastanova. She was also made a lecture and seminar in our school. You can see it on our website. So it's a very serious issue, and especially we talking from that kind of center, so I can hardly talk about that situation from inside. So I have my own kind of responsibility. So yeah, and actually you're absolutely right. It was not just happen in this particular program of the school. It was always our kind of focus, which we consider very important from the very beginning, as I said, from our own practice. So yeah, we should be really sensitive, and some positions maybe not so visible as those which I mentioned. So, but we also actually right now, yeah, very strong, and I'm very happy about that kind of new voices from Belarus, which is not new, but at the same time, they become more visible and more stronger. And again, this situation with subalternity, look how much media and international attention to events in Belarus, almost not much, I would say, compared to scale of the event. I think, and actually political experimentation of the event, that kind of involvement of IT specialists and so on. Next week, we have in our school presentation about IT people and their participation in the protest, because Belarus is very famous and these guys really play amazing roles. So I would not see that kind of effect like in Black Lives Matter, that kind of political experimentation that we'll see right now in Belarus. So that many things can be really discussed and need to be discussed and make more visible. And I would say it's our common responsibility.
Yeah, I think this is also one of the great things that is happening at your school and in your work, that you're making these connections between people from different post-Soviet countries through across this space. And you mentioned Madina Tlastanova and her contribution, and in her work she talks a lot about decolonial connections, or connections between different post-dependence contexts. And I was wondering whether you are looking also beyond the post-Soviet space, because that's where connections are difficult because of the current conflicts and wars, but maybe easier in some way. But also, are you looking for other contexts, solidarities, collaborations beyond the post-Soviet?
You know, actually, we are one of the few positions in Russian art which considered to be kind of totally international. So unfortunately or unfortunately, we work much more in the West. But
right now in Greece, yeah, this is something that I forgot to say. You're in Greece right now.
Yeah, in Greece and in Italy, in Spain, so in Netherlands. So we did a lot of stuff. But at the same time, working in this kind of situation, which is not, let's say, our, we always try to subvert it, or how to say better, maybe enter it from another door, you know, and actually try to scrutinize it through our own personalities and views. Like we did many works in Germany, where we also found actually one of our most interesting ontological, again, work was done in Baden-Baden, where we created the choir of Sozialistische Patienten, very important activist and so-called terrorist group, which was established in the 70s. And we made a choir, how they pop up inside of that kind of new situation. So yeah, but at the same time for us, when we enter it, we always keep in mind that we share, as you said, certain position of common political solidarity, but at the same time trying to enrich our vision through our different experiences. So sometimes it happens. So we also have been part of many kind of activist network, like social forums, where not completely, not Eastern European based or Nordic connection. We work a lot in Norway, where we also find certain kind of relations which allow us to speak, because actually the one of the another paragraph or point which I would love to discuss more is that certain politics of belonging. So if we invited to North, we have to invent what we are doing there and who we are. You can't simply come and pretend that you're international artist. International artists do not exist. So there exists some kind of certain agency which have its own genealogy and their own kind of responsibility and struggles. Yeah.
But, yeah, so I see Tanya is raising her hand. You can unmute yourself, or I think we can hear you now. No.
I'm unmuted.
Yes, now it's fine.
Yeah, when we were talking about this decolonial perspective and post-colonial and all these links, so Russia is very complicated place to talk about decolonization from, because a lot of kind of like vectors of colonization are present, and artists like Gaisama from Alkhacheva, they're talking from the place which is not really St. Petersburg, you know. They're talking about the consequences, this unfolding kind of like coloniality of Russian Empire and of Soviet Empire, right, if you call it. But then there is another vector, which is colonization of this post-socialist Russia or post-Soviet Russia by the West, and we see it in art very much. So it's really hard, and I think that if we look at the works of some Russian artists who talk about decoloniality, right, from a not very informed position, if we do not understand all these kind of like centuries when different colonial forces were influencing these localities, it's not doing what the colonial option is actually about this bringing to the forefront the voices which were systematically excluded. And in the case of Russia and project of Chto and this school, I think that it is pretty much decolonial, because the knowledge which is excluded and kind of like marginalized is the knowledge precisely about the Soviet cultural legacy. That becomes this native knowledge which we can access through some, you know, ontology or other methods, and that becomes our epistemic, you know, system from which we work and speak.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I see another question by Nella. Dmitry, can you see it?
On politics of belonging, how much you engage with the work of number of Eastern European artists? Yeah, they're very good friends. Actually, it was the question about archive. So yeah, so actually these people, Leah Perzhovsky and Irvin, really contributed a lot. Yeah, I mean, this kind of things also, yeah, I wouldn't say it's our major things, that kind of collecting or archiving things. Luckily, right now we have few good institutions, but at the same time, yeah, it's quite obvious, and yeah, I absolutely respect, and it's most of people whom she mentioned, close friends. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dmitry. Thank you, everyone who engaged, listened, asked questions, commented, and so on. Thank you, Tanya, also for your contribution. I think that was great. But we have to wrap up now. So it's been a long day and already many days of the conference, but I think it was a really great last artistic event and almost last plenary event. So thanks so much for connecting with us from Greece, from different places, and look forward to further conversations.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I think Tanya raised at the end very important question, how the decolonial, but at the same time, it's eternal problem. The whole decolonial knowledge right now formatted somewhere in best universities in the centers. Sorry, I don't know, but you know, it's kind of vicious circle. Yeah, and at the same time, we are modest enough not to do that. And actually, as you noticed, and I mentioned that we provide the space, you know, for that kind of voices. It can be queer voices, it can be LGBT or whatever voices, it can be voices from Kazakhstan, from Ukraine. But at the same time, of course, we have that certain kind of demanded self-critique. So we keep speaking from imperialist center of the power and what it means. So that for us may be central issue. And especially, you know, we are speaking not from Moscow, that's another story. So, guys, thank you so much for raising all that very provoking question. And I'm really happy that it happened and Ksenia organized, you know, we are in the middle of the travel, flights canceled, you're in the middle of nowhere, you don't know what happened, school goes on quarantine, everything in ruins. So I don't know much to say. But we said already too much.
Well, thanks to everyone for in the middle of everything that is happening for joining and still engaging in productive conversations.